Welcome back to Coffee with Krav. Grab your favorite beverage, your coffee. We're going to have a great time today. Uh, well, we have Labor Day. I hope everybody had a great Labor Day weekend. And Labor Day usually is time to go back to work and really work hard. And we're going to work on things today. I'm very, very excited about today's guests. We're going to work on understanding money. We're going to work on understanding some education for finances, and we got a perfect person here to help us with that. Kelley Holland. Kelley is the author of "You Are Worthy: Change Your Money Mindset, Build Your Wealth, and Fund Your Future." It's going to be available 2 weeks from today. You can't pre-order, just saying, but it's going to be available 2 weeks from today. She is also a financial coach and educator who, through her own firm, Own Your Destiny, has helped thousands of women shed their financial anxiety, become more confident and capable with money, and achieve financial well-being. Previously, Kelley was an award-winning business and personal finance journalist with the New York Times, Business Week, and CNBC. Very impressive. She has appeared on CNBC, PBS Frontline, and dozens of radio shows to speak about banking, investing, and personal finance. Kelley holds a graduate business degree from Yale School of Management, and she is a chartered financial analyst. She lives in northern New Jersey and with her husband and her ever-changing number of adult children. Good morning, Kelley. Welcome.
Good morning, Mark. It's a treat to be here.
Terrific. Kelley, let's start off. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but mainly grew up in Buffalo. So Snow and Kelley are friends.
Okay. And in most cases, money is not discussed by parents, whether they have it or they don't have it. Was finance talked at the dinner table at all growing up?
No, it did not come up in our family much at all, except in a mostly negative connotation. My father was an English professor, which was a path he chose sort of in his 20s, and he had been on a path to do exactly what his dad had done before him. So this shift caused a major rift, and he'd been on a path toward a lucrative career as a lawyer, but then he shifted into being an English professor, and and his father cut him off, and it became this huge rift that really never healed between them. It was awfully sad. My mother was an editor, so very smart people, but not in the world of not part of the world of finance, and in fact had directed their careers in a completely different direction. So really, the main message I got about money growing up was that it can cause strife, that you're best off not choosing a career based on the money, that if you're bright, that you'll find a way financially, and what you're really looking for is other kinds of satisfaction. Not a bad life lesson, but it left me, but I also never learned the nuts and bolts of budgeting or tracking my spending or any of those things that you really should know how to do. And then I also saw my mother, and this is typical, I think, of a lot of women of her generation. She would get this deer in headlights look when money issues came up. She was a very involved volunteer with a lot of women's health organizations, running boards and things. And I remember one time saying, "Mom, well, what's your budget?" She had no idea. So it was, that was the environment growing up. And needless to say, I went off, and after college made at least my share of 20-something money mistakes.
Okay, well, we'll get to some of those mistakes a little bit later, and we're going to talk a little bit about your book. But before that, I have a few questions. You're an award-winning journalist with the Times, Business Week, CNBC. What were some of the favorite areas that you like to cover?
Well, I was the money and banking editor at Business Week, so that tells you where I was busy. A really big story for me was one about a former bank called Bankers Trust and their derivatives business. It was it was controversial. It wound up in court. It's a long, convoluted story, and I don't want to take over the podcast, but it was exciting on many levels. To write it, the news gathering process was interesting. The legal process was quite terrifying, but obviously interesting, created very strong bonds among those of us at Business Week. And it was just so gratifying to see the impact that this had. I think that's really what's so great about journalism in general, is that it, done right, it's really giving people unbiased information they need to make the best choices for themselves. And this was a good example.
Excellent, excellent. I'll have to look it up at a different time.
Yeah. I mean, I will also say more recently at CNBC, when I really was writing about personal finance, that really set the course for this current chapter of my life, in that I was writing more and more about women and money, and got really passionate about the financial concerns that really get in women's, impede women's progress in so many ways. And realizing that a lot of them, while there are plenty of structural financial hurdles like the gender pay gap, there are also emotional hurdles that a lot of us carry that makes it very hard for us to bring our A game when we do have to deal with the stresses that face both women and men.
Well, as I mentioned before, you're a coach and you do work mostly with women. Let me give you a scenario. Let's say a woman walks into your office who maybe hasn't kept up with her finances. It's your first meeting with her. Just tell us a little bit about what that discussion is going to be like. Like, what's the first steps that she should be taking?
So the first thing that we do is we go through a process of discovery. It's completely non-judgmental. I'm helping her, helping me see and helping her see where things really stand, which can include the things that she's come to me feeling bad about, but also things where she's succeeded. And my goal is to have her leave that first meeting feeling like, oh, there's hope for me. I actually can feel better in this space. And I see that this is a person I can trust, who has my best interests at heart and will help me do it. I also have a tool that once we really dig into the coaching practice, and it's a nice assessment tool to help you wind up with not just a list of sort of areas of your financial life that you might want to work on, but also a nice visual representation of how you're doing in each of them, which helps you then gauge your progress as we work through our engagement together.
Excellent, excellent. And you know, going back to the book, you have excellent advice in the book, I must say, and really great life lessons. And I'm going to go into that, but just for terms of context, why did you write the book? What was the purpose there?
It seemed like another way that I could reach women who weren't my clients, but who also needed help just feeling better financially and taking charge of what is essentially a tool for living our best lives. Not everyone can work one-on-one with a coach. Not everyone works at a company where I provide programs. Not everyone belongs to an association where I speak. So a book is a way that I can reach more women and give them a roadmap to start doing some things on their own to get to a better place.
Excellent. Excellent. I like that's great reasoning. You know, a lot of my clients learned or didn't learn about finance from their parents. We talked about, you know, your relationship with your parents and what you learned there. And in some or many of the cases, they have a kind of a funny relationship with money. How do you help people understand their own relationship with money and then help them rewrite that story? Because in a lot of cases, they really need to rewrite that story.
We all carry stories about money, and most of them I've found are formed in childhood. I did, for this book, go through the process of interviewing over 100 women about their feelings about money. And in fact, Mark, question one was, how do you feel about money? And the things that came out were, if I could show you the word cloud that emerged from all these interviews, the biggest words were stress, anxiety, and love, hate. I think that's it. Anxious. And so, you know, the feelings they're all over the place. And some women said to me, I love money. I want more of it. I wish, you know, I love thinking about it. I love this. I love this. But the more common sentiment was one of stress and anxiety. the stories, interestingly, that we carry about money are almost always, as far as I can tell, formed in childhood, which is fine. We formed a lot of, this is how, as children, we interpret the world. Is we look at a situation, we interpret it, we create a story around it. It helps us move forward and, and respond in the next situation. And that's fine about money, but let's think about that. Not all the stories and not all the beliefs we had as children still fit us as adults. So
True.
Look, what I believed about what was cool fashion when I was 8 no longer holds true. And the world is a much better place for that. And what I eat, I don't live on vanilla ice cream anymore. That's also good. But if I'm still carrying around those childhood money beliefs, if they don't evolve the way my taste in food, clothes, friends, reading, everything evolves, you're dealing with a childhood-based set of beliefs, which may not reflect all of your skills and capability and talents and potential successes as an adult. So there is a way to start rewriting and editing your money story, if you will, so that it better reflects who you are in all your capabilities and successes as an adult.
It's interesting as you're talking about, I'm just thinking about my own situation. So I'll give you the scenario, and I guess this really in retrospect helped. So my dad, who came from another country, we were living in Brooklyn, an apartment building in Brooklyn, and he would give me, I don't remember how much it was, let's just say it was a quarter on Saturdays to go downstairs, and I was a little tiny kid, go downstairs, go to the local place, coffee shop, and get a Barron's. And maybe Barron's cost 15 cents. So there was an extra dime there. And that 10 cents was, for me to do whatever I want. So I would, spend it on comic books or candy or whatever. And then I bring the Barron's back. And then I remember talking about life lessons. I wanted Matchbox cars. I wanted like these cars, right? And so I said, Dad, can I get cars? He goes, what'd you do with the extra money that you had each time that you go get the Barron's for me? I was like, oh, well, I spent it. I bought comic books, or I bought. He goes, okay, well, if you want the Matchbox cars, why don't you start saving that extra money, and then you can use that to buy it. And that's what I did. I saved it, and so there was a whole life lesson in there that obviously helped me down the road. So that that's true. Just a thought that came up. So I appreciate that. Let me give you another scenario. I'm going to go over a few scenarios because we don't know who's going to be watching. So people from different age groups and different walks of life. But I hear this response. I hear this a lot, unfortunately, from married women. Oh, I just let my husband take care of that. I'm sure you've heard that. How do you respond to that? How do you help? I hate that, but how do you? I know how I respond to it, but I'd like to hear how you respond to that.
Well, I try and figure out what's going on there, and is that something that was sort of encouraged by the spouse, or is this something that she decided on her own? That's question one. And question two is, we sort of look at other parts of their relationship where they've delegated and then just stopped paying attention. And there usually aren't a whole lot. I mean, well, maybe car repairs, right? Like, look, my husband deals with all the car repairs. The less I know about it, the better. Right. But there's a lot that gets shared also. And so we look at what happens when you do lose focus like that, and sort of where that leaves you. So we talk about that, and we talk about what they might gain if they did engage a little bit. I'm not talking about being on top of the daily balances of every account, but I'm talking about knowing where the account numbers are and the passwords, if there's a financial advisor, how to reach that person, where the tax records are, who your accountant is. You should know you should have a working relationship with your advisor, because all of this is just empowering you. It doesn't mean that you have to take sole responsibility for any of these things if you're worried that you're going to do it wrong, which you probably won't. But you know, if you're worried about that, the whole idea is just staying engaged so that you are part of the picture. And so that when there are big decisions that need to be made, say about when someone's going to retire or how you'll pay for college for a child, you're part of that. It does strengthen your relationship with your spouse, and it does strengthen your relationship with your own future, if you will, because you're sort of, you're engaging a little bit with a key tool. I mean, look, in modern marriages, we all delegate.
Right.
But there's delegating and there's disengaging. And with money in particular, it is really better for everyone concerned if you're both engaged.
Excellent. Great advice. I agree 100%. Let me give you a different scenario. Let's say there's a highly successful woman at work, very, very smart, very capable, extremely capable of taking care of her own finances, but it's a mess. How do you help her?
Okay, so I'm thinking of a former client of mine who actually was referred to me by her financial advisor for almost that exact scenario, because this woman it was hard for the advisor to help her because of the state of things. And I think this happens sometimes, Mark, in your practice too, that lack of follow through. Oh, I'll get you back those documents. No, you won't. Or I'll come to the meeting. No, I won't. Right? It just, things don't get done at the client end. And it's hard. It is hard for an advisor to be useful in that scenario, right? You don't have all the information. You don't have the contact. You aren't able to engage the way you'd like to.
Right.
And it shortchanges the woman too. What I do a lot of times with my clients is help them figure out, when they've had a task that they haven't wanted to do in another context, what has enabled them to work through that thing. So a lot of times it has to do with having a larger goal that you relate to this task. So if you, let's say, your finances are messy, you feel overwhelmed at the thought of trying to get all this information together, it bores you, there are words you don't understand. And by the way, you're super busy and there are other things that you need to do with your time. We talk about what they would gain from doing this and what they gain from not doing it. And it usually becomes pretty clear that there's greater gain to be had from getting this stuff together. And then we map out an action plan. So, because as you know, organizing all this stuff, Rome wasn't built in a day, and this kind of stuff isn't. If you're a midlife successful woman with a lot of balls in the air, your financial life is probably less than simple. You probably have a lot of different accounts and a lot of different investments, and maybe there's an old retirement account hanging around somewhere and so on. And so getting a handle on all of that is going to be a big job, but you can work on it in bite-sized chunks. If you carve out 20 minutes every Sunday, by the end of the quarter, you will have a good handle on where you stand. And it'll feel like you'll feel a sense of accomplishment. Your advisor will be better able to work with you, and you'll know more, which is a great feeling in its own right.
Sometimes the enormity of just, everything's all over the place. Like, how can I get this done?
Yeah.
It's always that line of, how do you eat an elephant?
Right.
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. That's exactly it. Just first get all the information on the checking accounts, then find savings accounts, then find retirement accounts, and when you gather the information, make sure that it's in a form that you can use. I got a call once from a woman who said, oh, I have all the account numbers and everything, but I don't know which accounts they go to. Well, so that would be a step that you would need to take to relate those things.
That would make sense.
That would help.
Now let's take a young person out of school. They have a good job. They're just kind of making money, but they need to get into good habits. How would you talk to this person and say, these are some of the habits, these are the things that you should be doing?
Well, I will say one thing. There's a word that I don't use in my practice, and that's should, because women in particular get a lot of should thrown at them. And I'm trying not to be the boss lady. I'm essentially trying to be a lantern shining a light on their path and helping them see where they want to get to go. So should is not part of that. It's more, what's going to serve you. So, okay. So let's say I'm working with someone, I'm going to guess from this scenario that this person's making a lot of money. Maybe they haven't really started investing, for example. But okay, you and I both know that the younger you start, the more time your investments have to grow. So be some information sharing around that. There would be a discussion of investing basics without the jargon. And we would talk about ways that they could get that going simply without interfering with their glorious 20-something life. So
I'm going to stop you there, and we'll come back to it, because in your book you talk about one of my favorite topics in the world, what Einstein calls the eighth wonder of the world, which is compounding of interest. So yes, for those people that kind of know compounding of interest but maybe need a little bit better understanding, can you talk about summarize the importance of that concept?
Absolutely. So okay, compounding is essentially when your money earns interest, and then you earn interest on the interest as well as on your own money. So for example, let's say you invest, you put $100 in the bank, and in some fantasy world, you get 10% interest on it. So the next year you would have $110 if you didn't take any money out. So the year after, you're going to have more than 120. Your gain is going to be more than $10, because in addition to your initial investment earning interest, the interest earns interest. And you might not see a big bump from compounding initially, but the longer this goes on, the bigger that bump gets to be, to the point where you're earning more on your interest than on your initial investment. And the term there is over time. So that's why compounding is such a great thing, a great tool for building wealth when you're young. So
the younger you are, the better off you are in doing this type of investing, because that gives you much more time, and the longer the time, the more that you can build wealth, which leads me to another favorite, which is the rule of 72. Yes. So please elaborate on the rule of 72.
So the rule of 72, and this is one, I find this actually 20-somethings love the rule of 72, because it just seems like magic,
I love it too.
Right? It is, it's great. So the rule of 72 is, it tells you, if you know your, wait a minute, let me just say this really clearly. Okay, so 72, take the number 72, divide by the interest, or the
rate of return
you expect to earn on your money, divide that, and you get roughly the number of years it will take you to double your money. So, so it's a very nice, when you look and see, okay, wait a second, the stock market, let's say over time, I can pretty much feel good about earning 7% a year in the stock market. So 72 divided by 7 is going to give you something 9, 10 year. I'm not doing it well in my head. Between 10 and 11 years.
Yeah.
So, and you can double your money in that period of time. So
right. Perfect. Great. And
so that's double your money sounds awfully good to anyone.
Yeah. So from a perspective standpoint, when they're talking about investing, like you said, the stock market gives you around a 7% rate of return. You're doubling your money basically every decade, every 10 years.
Yeah.
10 becomes 20, 20 becomes 40, 40 becomes 80, right, becomes 160, and add zeros onto that if you have more money. But the opposite is, if you get a lower rate of return, let's say 4% rate of return, it's going to take you 18 years to double your money. So it's a great concept. I'm glad that you covered it in the book, and it really puts things into perspective for everyone, but especially for, like you said, for young adults.
I do want to say though that if you're starting to invest at 40 or 50 or even 60, all is not lost. You can still build wealth. And because I have gotten questions from women, in midlife or beyond, who say, well, I'm just sunk. Like I haven't done this, there's no hope for me. Yes, there is. You're not going to have all that power of compounding, but you can still make your money grow. You can still do a lot to increase your future security.
Okay, excellent. Great. Thank you for adding that. All right, let me give you another scenario. A question I often get from married couples with children is they're not sure where they're going to spend the money. Should I spend it on the kids? Should I spend it on retirement? You know, my house, now I got 2 kids or 3 kids. My house is kind of small. Maybe I should just buy a new house. So where should that money go? I know how I answer it, but I'm curious, you know, what you would say to this married couple.
Right. Well, I mean, everybody's situation is a little bit different. And again, subtracting the word should from my answer, because that's my approach. We would look at the array of goals they have and how they fit together and how you can prioritize them. And if there are any that can support the other, if you will. So for example, let's say you are interested in not providing financial support to your children forever and ever. Then what you might want to do is really save for their college education so that they can then get the relatively higher income that most college graduates get and be financially secure on their own terms. If you have a special needs child, that's different. Then there's just a whole different set of savings that needs to go on. But one thing I would say is that we do know that on average, parents of 18 to 34-year-olds, so that encompasses a lot of education years, but still 18 to 34-year-olds tend to spend twice as much on their kids as they do save for retirement. And that's just not a good recipe for anyone. Now, some of that is, as I said, education. But even when you back out the education, there's more spending on the kids than saving for retirement. And the reason that's an issue is that in our modern society, you can borrow for pretty much anything except retirement. So if you don't save for your own retirement, you don't have a way to get it done. I mean, you can get Social Security, you can get whatever retirement, but if you have a pension coming your way or something, but you can't take out a loan and expect that to finance your retirement. So you really do need to provide for yourself. And then the other piece I would say about that is that when we create financial security for ourselves for later in life, that is a gift to our children in and of itself. It gives kids a huge chunk of peace of mind to know that at least mom and dad are financially set, and that they are in that way self-sufficient, and the kids can move on with their lives, which is the way it's supposed to go.
Perfect. Great.
I mean, it's every family's different, and these priorities will shift, but in general, look, I still pay my son's cell phone bill because it costs me nothing, right? It's the family plan, but he is about to be 26. So I know whereof I speak, but I don't spend nearly as much on him as I do save for retirement. Okay,
excellent. So going back, let's say your son or people of his age, you talk about spending, and in your book you talk about spending and creating a balance sheet for yourself. If someone's never done that, never tracked their spending, never created a balance sheet, how easy? What would you say? What's the first step, or how easy is it to do something like that?
Well, by my book, because there are worksheets in there and good instructions.
Okay.
So Your Worthy has a whole bunch of worksheets for a balance sheet, for tracking spending, for setting what I call a statement of intent, which most people call a budget, all these things. But other ways you can start tracking your spending is really, you can start with something as simple as just a little notebook you carry in your bag. My kids always roll their eyes when I say things about, keeping track on paper, but you can definitely find apps on your, for your phone or your computer that will help you. You can save receipts and tally them up every few days. There are great budgeting and spending tracker programs online. So really you can use any number of methods, and the one that you can stick with is the one that's best for you. I had a 22-year-old client who liked doing it by hand on a spreadsheet. She made her own chart and she liked doing it that way. And I had a 70-year-old client who used a phone app. So there's no one size fits all. It's just creating that mindfulness as a habit and keeping track.
And
you do gain
speaking
a
of,
lot of knowledge about what you're doing, and it can help you stop and reflect and say, wow, I really did spend a lot on X, and Ubers, let's say. And, I maybe like next time I could walk to that activity and I would have more money for coffee with a friend afterwards or what have you. I mean, you can start to notice things that are going on and say, I wonder if there's a way I can change that and direct my money towards something that's more meaningful to me.
yeah, you can't change habits unless you look at things, right? I mean,
Unless
you
you
don't
know
know
what's
that you have
going on.
a negative habit that you're doing. Like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was spending all that on that. Yeah, so you're 100% right. And for those people that are earning a salary, just on maybe a rule of thumb, what percentage of their salary should they be saving?
Well, I mean, a common rule of thumb is 15%, 20% of your gross, but that's, that can be a lot. Look, more saving is better than less. And saving a little is better than not saving at all. We all have to do what we can. The student debt crisis is in the headlines every day. And I don't want to get into the politics of that, but, for people carrying a large debt load, that's a big burden and that can really impede savings, just as one example.
Yeah.
But, it's better. If the more you can save, the better off you'll be. Remember the compounding thing, like the earlier you do it, the more you'll be able to invest and the more you can make your money grow.
So Kelley, I used to teach a class called Financial Strategies for Successful Retirement. And when we would talk about savings, I used to say the same line, and that's give till it hurts. How do you know what that number is? You got to wait till it hurts. You got to keep putting money away, and all of a sudden, like, I can't do this or I can't do that. This is starting to hurt me. Yeah. So, that what percentage that winds up to be, I like that 15% at least. But, I always like to say, give till it hurts.
Good approach.
Thank you. One of the things we were just talking earlier before we started, and I was just asking you some questions that are coming up all the time or a lot these days for you. And what you said is you have clientele that are successful women and they're looking especially with the pandemic, everything going on, what's the next step? What's the next step? So, I mean, I'm seeing that not just women, men, just people in general, as they're looking to move. I don't like to say the word retirement, but they're looking at whatever their next thing is. So how do you answer that? How do you help people with that?
So let's put the word retirement over here and let's use Serena Williams's language, right? Let's evolve away from our careers. And so then what comes next? So yes, I do hear from a lot of women with these questions, and I don't know if it's pandemic related or it's just coincidence, but this seems to be a question that's coming up a lot. Is I don't know how to think about my next chapter because I don't know what the money is, and I don't, they get caught in this cycle of I can't figure out one without the other, so I'm stuck. So if you notice, there are two things going on there. One is what will I be doing? What is it that I want to do? And then the other one is, can I afford to do that thing? So there are two problems that need to be worked together. And I think in general, the what do I want to do needs to come first, because once you really have, for a couple of reasons. One, you need to know what you're aiming toward, because whenever you have a goal like that, it helps you get past any discomfort you might feel in taking the steps you need to take to achieve that goal. If you can really see it, really visualize it clearly, it helps you stay motivated through the hard parts. So I help women start figuring out what are the things they're good at, what do they like to do, when are they in flow, what gives them joy, what do they want more of in their life, and how might that translate into everyday living as opposed to every other Saturday or what have you. So, you might have a sport that you like, but you don't want to spend all day, every day doing that. That stays in the, the sometimes category. But you might really just love art and be a real appreciator of art. So what if you got a job as a docent? There are things, instead of just going to a museum once a month. So when you can pull out sort of what are the things you love, what are the things that give your life meaning, how can you get more of those? Then you know what you're aiming toward. And then you know what kind of financial, what kind of financial arrangement you need to support that. So if you're going to be a docent in a museum, you're not going to be making much money at all. So you're going to need some pretty significant savings and the ability to generate income from those savings to support that. So then we would work on what that might look like, from here to getting there. And actually at that point, I would probably work with that person's financial advisor, because you're getting at that point into an investing plan, and I'm not an investment advisor. I understand all these things and I can talk about these things and educate about these things, but that's where advisors generate those kinds of plans. But we sort through, okay, so what do you need to be doing with your savings? Are you invested enough? Are you this? And then we figure out a sort of a general framework that can support the life goals that they've identified.
Yeah, it's and that's great advice. And the financial advisor part of it is you want to know what your number is, right?
Right.
I remember there was a commercial, I think it was Voya or one of the companies, and there was someone walking around with a number, and each person has a different number, and they went onto the subway with the number, and they're walking in the streets with the number. Everybody has a number. And what we try to do is we try to help our clients figure out what that number is, so that they can live in the lifestyle that they're accustomed to and continue to live in that lifestyle, being able to do whatever things that they want to do in life. So yeah, that's a great marriage between the two. Thank you. Thank you.
And I love that you said, you help them get to that number so they can live the life they want. Because I think we can agree that for most people, the number itself is not, maybe we are carrying it on the subway, but it's not the end objective for most of us. Most of us are not going to die happy because we hit, 6 million. We're going to die happy because we lived a fulfilled, connected life. So the money is just there to support those larger objectives.
Just a tool. It's just a tool. Money is a tool to be able to use for whatever you want to get out of life. Yes, we have very commonalities here. I was wondering what your thoughts are on charity. When's a good time to start giving, and when's a good time maybe to start, to step that up a bit? Just general thoughts on charity.
Charity is a really personal thing, and there are lots of different ways to give. So for some people, charitable giving is an impulse that they've grown up with. Perhaps they're part of a faith community where tithing is common. So giving is just part of every day for them. Charity in some families can take the form of supporting older family members, paying off a parent's mortgage, and so on. And then but charity can also mean supporting organizations and causes that you care a lot about. So you first think about the kind of charity you want to perform, and then where that fits with your life goals. I mentioned the exercise I do with clients at the beginning. One of the things we talk about is giving, and for some clients it's a huge thing. It's very important when they come to me, and for some it's just not. And that's, I'm going to guess that everyone is a giver in some fashion. They may not identify as such, but they are. They may give advice, they may give time, even if they don't give treasure. So, and it can also be in the work that you do, right? If you're a healthcare worker, if you're a librarian, I consider those forms of giving. So giving can take many forms. But there are tools to help us from a financial standpoint get the most bang for our buck, if you will. So one tool that a lot of people like to use is what's called a donor advised fund. And these are, these are charitable funds that you can create. And essentially it's not unlike having your own foundation, but you don't have all the paperwork and, all the administrative things that you would need to do if you wanted to set up a foundation. You can open a donor advised fund account with a few $1,000s also, which you typically wouldn't do for, to create a foundation. And what you can do is you can donate to that fund And then when you put the money in, you get a tax deduction at that point, and then you get to decide at any point where you want that money to go. So you can choose a strategy that makes the most sense for you in terms of taxes. This would be a thing I suggest you call your accountant about. But there are ways to do that to maximize what you get in terms of deductions. So a donor advised fund can help you do that. The thing with a donor advised fund is that we do know that balances in those accounts have gone up dramatically ever since they were started, which means the money's not getting out. Not all the money is getting out to charities. So it's important, if you're going to use a donor advised fund and all its, and benefit from all its advantages, make sure that you do in fact go on and donate the money to organizations that need it.
Yeah, I have a feeling. I have a feeling there'll be some changes that'll go on at some point where they're going to force the issue, because you're right. We have many clients that are in donor advised funds, and a lot of them are donating and do it on a yearly basis. But a couple of cases where the thing just keeps rising and rising.
Right.
And I think the government's kind of has one of their eyes on that. I mean, they have eyes on a lot of other things right now, but they have an eye on that. So I have a feeling at some point they'll make a change there. You have some timeless advice about investing. You mentioned you need to know what your timeline is. You need to understand your risk tolerance. You need to look at tax smart investing. I love that. Perfect. You nailed that. You also look to you're also looking to educate, and we are always looking to educate our clients all the time. And speaking of education, in your epilogue, I love your messaging about education. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yes. Let me back up for a minute though, because as you know, Mark, I work with women, and I want to say that in general, women tend to get less financial education growing up, that we know from multi years of studies, that parents tend to talk to their sons more than their daughters about money. And that when they talk to their daughters, excuse me, it tends to be more about budgeting and kind of micro saving, little ways to save a penny here and a penny there. And when they talk to their sons, it's more of a focus on investing and growing wealth. So out of the gate, a lot of women, grow up not learning a whole lot, and then we don't provide a lot of financial education in our schools. I happen to live in New Jersey, where we do mandate financial education, but your district may or may not take it seriously. The instructor may not be informed. So
they mandate that in high school?
Yes, in New Jersey.
That's
and
good.
20 something states do, but I believe a majority still do not. And again, but the caliber of what's taught, can vary widely. So it's really luck of the draw as to whether we come out as adults knowing even the basic things about managing our money. And then I will say that women also get a lot of sort of tropes thrown at them about how they are with money. The image of women as chronic overspenders, as irresponsible, as bad at math, as risk averse. Hello, we bear children. We are not risk averse, but we are risk aware because we look at the big picture. But I think risk averse is inaccurate when it comes to most women. But so anyway, what happens is a lot of women reach adulthood and they don't necessarily know all they should or could about money. And then furthermore, with all these tropes thrown at them, they often underestimate what they do know. And so they don't trust themselves to make good choices with the knowledge they do believe they possess. So one of the things I'm trying to do with this book is just really open up the conversation around money and taking charge of our money for women, and make it a subject that we talk about just as readily as we talk about, our exercise or a book we've read, or education, or our careers, and that money just becomes another one of those topics. It's not scary. It's not off limits. It's not that thing where all of a sudden everyone, falls silent or says, "Oh, I'm so bad at it." It's a place where we feel just as empowered as we do in all these other parts of our world. So I do in the epilogue talk about ways to talk with our children and teach our children about money at different ages. And you really can kind of unspool the level of responsibility you give them as time goes on. So it might be like the little allowance that you got, you know, when you were young, Mark, and then next step, you might get more of an allowance to cover more things, or you might get it less often. So you have to save and budget it. You know, over time, you know, you help kids figure out, okay, they're getting a job. How does that work? And what are they doing with that money? You can build in conversations around charity with that, and certainly conversations around investing. But all of this can be part of what goes on and just helps women step into the world with greater confidence, not just with their money, but with a whole lot of, it spreads into other areas of their lives. So opening up that conversation, sharing the information is just, I think, incredibly powerful.
I love the messaging, Kelley. Your book, I did read it. It was terrific. I love the educational value of it. I love your messaging that you have here today. I really appreciate it. You've said it all. You've said it all. So I want to thank you for coming on to Coffee with Krav. And
thank you, Mark. It's been a treat.
Oh, fantastic. You did a wonderful job. Really, really appreciate it. And for those Coffee with Krav fans out there, our next Coffee with Krav will be November 1st, 10 o'clock a.m. It's always the first Tuesday at 10 o'clock every 2 months. So I look forward to seeing everybody there on the next great topic. Once again, Kelley, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.